These are the 5 key steps that Horizons Leadership believes that every church should be doing now to ensure that you have a fully funded ministry plan throughout this coronavirus crisis. I was coaching 2 churches yesterday, both of which are having above average attendance. Their giving is fantastic, but they also are following these basic principles here. And one is they're not using words like the church is closed. I would be a rich man for every time that I have seen a church announce the church is closed. The building is closed. The church should be open and active and making a difference in the lives of the community and the world. There are numerous ways to do that. And that brings me to my second point, the mobilizing for ministry. If your church is not doing more today than it was before the coronavirus, you're missing an opportunity. The churches who are prospering are those churches who are mobilized. Have mobilized their folks. They're delivering groceries to vulnerable persons who need to stay in. They are setting up phone trees where they're checking in with each other. They have set up their small groups and their Sunday schools are using Zoom to continue ministry. They have children's church that's been set up and they're streaming that on live. They are doing more today, and there may never be a greater opportunity in our lives for the church to stand up and strengthen itself. And that strength should carry us well beyond the corona crisis. The 3 things we are going to talk to you today are about communicating with your ministry and financial leaders. It is absolutely critical in this moment that you are having a constant stream of dialogue with these leaders, promoting reoccurring giving. There's never a better time. I'm going to show you financially why that is in your best interest. I'm going to show you from an engagement perspective why that is in your interest. And we're going to begin today by Joel talking about the importance of offering talk. At Horizons, when we about 50% of the work we do is coaching churches in what we call next level generosity. That's just lifting churches from where they are to the next place that God would have them be in terms of their generosity. So we're coaching around best practices. And one of the top 5 most important best practices is to have a strategic offering talk every Sunday before that offering plate is passed. And Joel's going to go over with you today the components of what that looks like. Joel?
Joe, thank you so much for the introduction and the setup, and I appreciate the opportunity now to share a little bit about the offering talk and how it can be incredibly impactful in your church in this season. So Joe, let's go to the next slide. There we go. So staying financially strong in this season with respect to an offering talk, that 2 minutes or less just before the offering is received, sharing a story, sharing a scripture, sharing a call to action. To do that well, we believe it takes 3 things. You have to be intentional, it needs to be inspirational, and it needs to be informational. So let's quickly unpack what we mean by each one of those. The first thing about being intentional is this. We want to encourage you to make it a specific part of your online worship service, that it not be in the early announcements as sort of a prelude, disconnected from what's happening in the service, or as kind of a postlude after the service. But we think it can be most impactful if it is included as a part of your online worship service. We also think it's important that in this season, that there not be a perception of pressure, guilt, desperation, or manipulation. There's so much of that outside the church. When folk are streaming in on Sunday morning looking for hope and encouragement, the church is the last place they need to feel pressure and desperation. We think it's important to make it worshipful and sacred. We believe at Horizons that the act of giving is an act of worship, and that it is a sacred moment, returning back to God that which God has entrusted to us. And so we want to encourage you not to make it perfunctory or transactional. The church has bills to pay, so we need for you to give, but indeed helping people connect their giving as an act of worship. And always when we're asking people to do something, we want to express gratitude and a thank you for their faithful giving, and let them know that they're appreciated, and that we are thankful for them. And then allow time in the service for people to actually give. So what do we mean by being inspirational? And by that, again, just to be clear, that when we talk about an offering moment, this is before the offering is taken. And one of the ways I like to talk about this, Joe, is helping people see the impact of their giving, connecting giving to ministry, connecting dollars to impact. And so one of the best ways we think that you can do that is to simply share a story of a life that has been changed, making it relevant to today's circumstances. And so what we mean by that is maybe using video or pictures to show what your church is doing in this season. Maybe taking groceries to a shut-in. Maybe your church packs lunches. I'm working with 2 churches right now that I've noticed on Facebook regularly. They're showing pictures of the ministry that they're doing in the community in this season. And this would be a great time on Sunday morning to show what your church is doing, and with pictures or video. But also consider including story of lives that were changed because they were served or they served someone. And then consider, after sharing a story, putting it in the context of a bigger picture. For instance, if you are sharing a story of someone that was a shut-in and their name was Tim, just simply share something. There are an average of 47 people just like Tim that we're trying to serve each week. People want to know measurable outcomes. So as much as you can share data and specific numbers, I think that would be helpful. And then for some churches, and sometimes it's just simply sharing a scripture, that this can be a teaching moment, why it's important to give, why it's important to be generous, why it's important to be a good steward of God's resources. And sometimes that's best done with a passage of scripture. And then have a call to action. Don't be timid about inviting your people to continue to be generous, but in the scriptural context, as they can. People are fearful right now about their jobs and their income and what the future is going to have. And so we always want to put it in the context of 2 Corinthians 8:8. Where Paul is talking about the generosity of the Macedonians. He talks about they gave as they could. Invite people to serve and to give. So we want to encourage you to be inspirational in your offering talk. Joe, let's go to the next slide. So what do we mean by being informational? And by this, being instructional, helping your people know exactly what you're asking them to do, not assuming that they understand or they know. For some of your folk, they've been giving digitally, they've been e-giving for years, and so nothing changes for them. But in every church, there's going to be a group of folk that are accustomed to bringing their check and giving it in church, giving it in Sunday school. They're used to writing that out, and this is a very different season for them. So we want to encourage you to be instructional. Make it easy. Offer to help them. If you have people in your church that you think might need some individual help, offer to say, or say in your offering talk, if you would like help to know how to do online giving or how to do text to give, offer to help them. Share a video of someone who was doing it. Talk about what you mean by an auto bank draft. Even consider creating a video walking people how to do an automatic bank draft. I was talking with the church yesterday. Let's go back real quick, Joe. I'm sorry. Talking with a church yesterday that was getting ready to send a communication out to the church about they could continue to mail checks in. And I just made the suggestion, why don't you consider dropping in the envelope with the letter some self-addressed stamped envelopes, making it easier for your people. Again, that the goal here is make it easy for our folk who may actually now be in shelter in place. And always have appropriate information on the screen as you're talking. And then this is a cool thing, Joe, you may want to, let me ask you, Joe, jump in right here because you saw this happen this past Sunday. What do you mean? What do we mean by indicating in the chat box with heart or smiley emojis? I think this is a cool idea. So Joe, yeah, tell us what you mean by that, what we mean.
Sure. A lot of churches are worshiping their live streaming through Facebook. If you're using Facebook Live to stream, you've got an opportunity to have people drop in emojis. So during the offering, if you ask people, you definitely want to create an offering moment in your worship where the pastor is seen putting their recurring giving card or gift in the offering plate. Other people that are on the platform are seeing that. While that is going on, while you're asking others at home to text to give or go online and make their gift, or maybe just to write their check out and put it in the envelope that you sent them in that moment, that they drop an emoji, a smiley face, a heart, or a thumbs up, and those float across the screen, and it gives an incredible sense of community that we're all in this together. If you don't have that, you're streaming, very likely you also have a chat box on the side. If you're not using that, I would encourage you to enable it to let people chat. Put a moderator in there, put a pastor in there who may be at home and not allowed to be on the platform because of a limitation, where they're asking questions, and encourage them to send a response if they're giving, to talk about how they're giving. I gave electronically. I gave, and those will scroll through, and people will get the sense that we are together, doing this together in this moment, funding the ministries that have been described not only in the offering talk, the ministry moment part of that, but described throughout the week in various emails and encouragement for the church.
Thank you, Joe. Let's go to the next slide real quick. So it's important to remember that you most likely will have some audio only people tuning in. So as you craft your comments and you're thinking about how you want to communicate the offering moment, the offering talk, just remember to craft your words in a way for those who may not be able to see what you're doing, but they can only hear. And then consider an email or a video on Friday, just reminding people to tune in. Consider creating a downloadable worship guide. What a cool idea. And then within that communication, create and show links to online giving, ACH, bank draft, sign-up forms, and so on. So to wrap a bow around this section, I just want to share real quickly about a church I worked with several years ago in Tennessee that drove home for me the power and the impact of offering giving. The year before I began working with them, they ended the year with a significant overage, which was highly unusual at that time. Bills paid and this overage and their giving as they closed out the year. And so I asked the executive pastor, what do you attribute that to? And so he talked with me a little bit about a number of things that they were doing. They were really growing their culture of giving and generosity. And they were moving in that direction fairly effectively of year-round generosity. But he said the capstone of all of our strategies, of everything that we do, the capstone is our offering talk. And he said every Sunday morning, just before we receive the offering, our pastor will stand up and he'll tell a story, something that may have happened in the student ministry or the children's ministry or in the single adults or in the college ministry or in the elderly. And he'll tell a story of life change and transformation. And then he will say to the congregation there that Sunday morning, Thank you for your giving and your generosity. It is your giving that made this story possible. Thank you for writing yourself into God's story in their lives. And then the call to action every single Sunday is something similar to this. He will say, if you're here this morning and you want to be a part of these stories, if you want to be a part of this generosity movement in our church, here's how you can do that. And then he'll walk very quickly through how to put something in the offering plate, giving kiosk in the back of the church, text giving, online giving, giving at the website. But he'll quickly walk through, and as he's sharing these ways to give, again, this is before the offering, sharing the ways to give, they're on the screens up front. And I walked away from that conversation realizing that if a church could only do one thing to grow their culture, it would be the offering talk. And what a great season, what a great time for our churches to help people see in this season how their giving is making a difference. So Joe, I'm going to turn it now over back to you, and we're going to talk about that very thing of e-giving and the importance of helping our people understand how they can give digitally and electronically.
Sure. Well, Joel, I appreciate your comments there. Before we can get to recurring giving, that's really the goal. We've got to first establish channels for e-giving. The reason we establish channels for e-giving is not so much that it increases giving, and it does. It does because it makes giving more convenient. People aren't carrying cash and checks like they used to, and they're really just a substitute for putting a cash or a check in the offering plate. The popular forms of e-giving are ACH, bank draft. Every church can set this up. It's so simple to do. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Credit card, debit card, bill pay. That's something that individuals can do to have a check sent to the bank, to the church from their bank. And kiosk, dip jars. Kiosks used to look like big ATM machines. Now today they're simply iPads with card readers on the side. People are using those same kiosks to sign children in. Dip jars, squares, those are where I see those being used is people are literally passing these dip jars down the aisle, and people put their ATM or credit card into it and enter the amount and their number, and they pass it on to the next person. So technology is really helping us out. Some of those applications aren't working for us today because we're not gathering in person. So what is recurring giving? We just established what electronic giving is, but recurring giving is when the donor chooses an amount, a payment frequency, and a payment frequency that are automatically sent to your church. Monthly is the most common frequency, but giving persons the option of weekly, twice a month, or quarterly are also available through your providers who are giving you this option. So the basic definition around recurring giving is that it is a gift that happens automatically without the donor having to do something each week to make that happen. And when people give automatically on the first day of the month, giving goes up, and I'm going to show you. But before we do that, I want to talk about some of the plans. Now, in regard to ACH, in most cases, it is cheaper to just simply set this up with your bank. Go to see your bank. If the lobby is closed, you can do it by communicating with them by telephone. The bank can email you the documents. You can sign them, take pictures of them, and email those pictures back to the bank. If you are wanting to set up something that will process credit cards, debit cards, give you text to give, then you're going to need to use an online company like Vanco or Tytherly or PushPay. And I have before you a couple of different companies. I'm not endorsing one or the other. These companies that are up here are ones that we have a number of churches that use, and we've not heard complaints. So I would assume that they are good choices for you. But it's an incredibly profitable and competitive market. So if you're going to move this way, I would encourage you to take a resource that we have online, and it's a form to help compare pricing. These guys send you pricing options, and they're really complex. So you've got to dig out the different ways that they describe pricing. And this basic document allows you to compare apples to apples. But let's just take, for instance, this top one, which happens to be Vanco. If your church has $20,000 a month or less in donation, there's a $10 monthly fee, and they're going to charge 2.75% plus 45 cents a transaction for a debit or a credit card. Now look just below that at ACH. That's just 1% plus 45 cents per transaction, substantially less, roughly about a third the price of debit cards and credit cards. So there should be in your church an identified preferred method of receiving electronic recurring giving. And for most churches, that's going to be ACH. Your banks typically charge you either nothing, or the fees are small enough that your compensating balances that you're already keeping eat those up for you. So you'll need to look carefully at the pricing. If you think about 1% on the ACH as a means to get reoccurring giving, it wasn't very many years ago that most churches were using envelope, and they were spending a lot more than 1% of their donations to send everybody boxes of envelopes at home. So this is, if you think about it, it's a lot like that, but a much cheaper method than we've used in the past. So from the donor's perspective, this is what's important. Is it easy to use? Is it fast? Do I have options that are preset there? I can click monthly, weekly. I can choose between various funds. I can give to the operating budget and to a ministry fund or my building fund pledge. Does it feel seamless and safe? This is a big deal, because when you use a third party like this, you are moving from your website. When they click that donate button in the upper right hand corner of your website, when they click that, they are moving to that third party's landing page, and that landing page needs to look like your page. It needs to have your logo on there. It needs to have the same color scheme that yours has, so that people feel comfortable. We see about a 45% reduction in giving when it looks like they've moved to somebody else's webpage. So even if you have this, I'm encouraging you to go back and look at this, particularly look at the way your website's set up. Default settings, we'll talk about those later, because they will impact significantly your success in electronic giving, and more specifically recurring giving, based on what the user experiences when they get there and the presets that you have control of. Most churches that I look at, they've set this up. They've let somebody in the business office work with say PushPay to put things in, and they have just accepted the default settings. So instead of a confirmation letter that says, my goodness, thank you so much for helping to fund these precious ministries that we've got going on in our church, the donor gets something back like, this is to confirm a $75 donation to First Baptist Church of Charleston. That's all it says. You have control over that. So I would encourage you to go in and use all the functions of your online giving and see what kind of response that you get and make sure those settings are correct. Now, when you start to talk about recurring giving, you're going to get some complaints. And one of the first complaints that you may hear is that our congregation isn't computer savvy. Um, it may, in fact, be true that the person who is speaking to you and saying that to you isn't computer savvy. It may, in fact, be true that there are people in the church that are not computer savvy, but it is highly unlikely that the majority of the church haven't already experienced or are using these kinds of functions. So for instance, in 2015, that was a long time ago. Think about how many automatic draft signups you've been asked to make since that point. But in 2015, 67% of Americans were already paying their bills with recurring bill pay for their water bill, for their electric bill. And essentially, bank draft, ACH bank draft, is the exact same thing. They are simply setting up a recurring gift. We don't usually use the word payment, but a recurring gift to the church that they have determined what day it comes out and the frequency and the amount of that. ACH giving cards are incredibly easy to use. The only information you will typically need to set up ACH at your bank is the donor's name, address, routing number, and account number. All of that information is typically on somebody's check. That's why we used to be required to give the voided check so that the bank or the church could verify that information is correct. You can still do that. If somebody sends you a picture of their check or writes void on it and sends you a picture of their check, that's enough information to get them started. So you can create these cards, mail them out to people, and they can take a picture of it, return it to you, or you can send a self-addressed stamped envelope and do that. It is as simple as signing up to have your gas bill paid on a recurring basis. But Create helps. There are people that have not signed up to pay their gas bill because that seems intimidating to them. So invite people that need help to get help from you. You can use a free version of Zoom video where you can video chat just like we are here today, and you can screen share and walk people through the process of signing up. You can create a little video that people can click on, hang that on your website or on the donate landing page, and that will suffice as well. The second complaint that you're going to frequently get is we like the offering plate the way it is. And what I think well-meaning people mean by that is they want to put something in the offering plate. They value the act of worship of giving. And I'll confess I'm one of those people. I was not willing to use recurring giving in the church that my wife and I attend until they created some substitute that I could put in the offering plate. Now, the picture that we have up there is a full offering plate. It is full of envelopes and dollars and checks. But I've got to confess, when I go to churches today, what I'm seeing are empty offering plates going by with $3 bills and an envelope in it by the time it gets to the back row. And what that's training people to do is to devalue the act of worship. If I am a non-giver or a sporadic or nominal giver, and I'm sitting beside a leader in the church, an elder, a lay leader, somebody on the vestry or the session, and I see them pass that plate empty by me and their entire family, what I'm learning from that, what I'm being taught is this church does not value giving. So I feel awfully comfortable not making a gift to the church. And we can stop that. Two things we need to do to stop that. First, you need to create a substitute to put in the offering plate when those are being passed today. And you may be thinking, well, Joe, why are you talking about this now? We don't have offering plates. We're sitting at home. We're talking about video streaming. Why would you be talking about seatback cards now? Well, the reason is we need to create these laminated cards now, or some substitute of this, so that when we ask people to sign up for recurring giving, we are overcoming their objection. I'm not going to do that because I won't have anything to put in the plate when it comes by me. The second thing that needs to happen is the pastor and the people on the platform and the choir and everybody else need to be seen putting their recurring giving cards in the plate. And when you do, we will be passing full plates. We will be elevating the act of worship, of giving in the service back the way that I think it was originally intended, not as a backdrop to the anthem of a choir. We can have a beautiful choir singing, or the praise band can be playing great music while we participate in the act of giving. So when we're promoting, and that's what we're talking about here, is how do we promote recurring giving, not just electronic giving, but recurring giving to members and regular attenders of the church. And we do that by speaking to what's important to them that makes sense. First, ease and convenience. By far, that's the reason that people do it. They don't have to find their checkbooks on Sunday morning. They don't have to try to remember. It is done. The second reason is really an issue of faithfulness. People like the idea of their gifts being there even when they're not. One of the reasons that giving is actually going down in the church today, there's less giving that happened in 2018 than existed in 2017. And that is because people are attending church less frequently, and many people in church give when they are present. So their giving is a reflection of the gifts that the number of times that they attended. So by having recurring giving, their gifts are there even when they're not. I've heard a lot of people say, I love it because it keeps me from falling behind. I used to write that monthly check, and sometimes I just forget. It was the first day of the month, and I think I'd given it, and I didn't give it. And here I find myself having already spent that money, lost track of it. The reverse of that is first fruit giving. When you give from the first fruits of your earnings, then you're given in a way that's consistent with the biblical idea of offering to God our tithes and our offerings from the very first, the very best of what we have. And the fourth reason is that the church asks them to. And this is really important for the recurring giving program. We need the leaders to sign up. We need your finance team to sign up. We need your vestry, church council, board of elders, deacons. We need those groups to sign up 100% or in high numbers, because that is inspirational for the church. When the leaders sign up, the church will follow. If your leaders don't sign up, then you're going to have a much more difficult time hitting high numbers of recurring giving. One of the churches I told you I was coaching yesterday has, and their finances are doing great. They are finding an abundance in this season. One of the reasons is 85% of their funds come in through recurring giving on the first of the month. Now you can plan with that. Things can happen in the life of the church, but that is strong giving. And what they found are some large donors are also kicking in over and above to fund their expanding ministry. So when the church asks a leader to do it, even if they would prefer to put a check in the plate or they'd prefer to do something different, many of them will simply say yes because they understand their leadership is going to help inspire that sporadic giver to become a recurring giver, a consistent giver, and then move along that giving path from sporadic giving to percentage giving on toward a tithe. There's financial benefits of e-giving as well. In 2017, Banco said that their e-givers, now these are not recurring givers necessarily, just people that are giving electronically, gave 15% more than the people who did not use electronic giving. Just the next year, PushPay saw that had risen among their churches to 33%. More giving from e-givers than traditional givers. And one of the reasons for that is that very often when you sign up with a company, they are encouraging you to do a recurring giving development plan, the same thing that I'm asking you to do here, and we're seeing the impact of that. Actually, they'll most likely ask you to do an electronic giving push. You need to take that a step further and make it a recurring giving push. Now, the nonprofits, and we do work with faith-based nonprofits, these folks understand the importance of recurring giving. The Network for Good giving data says that nonprofits are seeing that recurring donors give 42% more than donors who give sporadically or write checks or are set up on a non-recurring basis. Classy did a study called The State of Modern Philanthropy just last year, and they saw that recurring donors give 5.4 times more over their lifetime than do non-recurring donors. So there's a financial benefit to it, but there's also an engagement benefit to it. Vanco, which is one of the companies that we showed you earlier, said that 43% of e-givers in their study attend Bible study versus 35% of traditional givers. And it just keeps going. They take part in more service. They attend more events. They attend more church functions. They serve in greater ways in leadership. And you may be thinking, well, this is because more active people are signing up for e-giving. And that may be one of the cases, but that would not cause overall giving to go up. So for overall giving to go up, and that's what we're seeing study after study after study, what's happening are sporadic givers are becoming consistent givers by being recurring givers. And this page would suggest that where they have put their money, their heart is following. I think that's a principle that I've heard before. Where your money is, there your heart will also be. So let's get started. In Giving 365, there is a recurring giving plan that essentially is about 20 pages. It is a checklist of things you need to do to set up and prosper with your recurring giving. I have yet to see a church that could not achieve 50% of their funds coming in on a recurring basis, not just electronically, but a recurring basis that put any kind of sustained effort into that. And that's what this plan is. Right now, when you read it, it's adopted to the coronavirus. But these practices that you're putting in place are going to help to sustain you over the long run. So I'm going to hit just a few of the high points. There's just 10 of them here in the recurring giving plan. You're going to see dozens and dozens of them. It'll say the pastor and chairperson should do this. The video team does this. We need to see a family telling their story. And it tells you when, gives you examples of everything that I'm describing. And that is found in Giving 365. When you enter, there's a folder that is coronavirus and social distancing best practices. Click on that, and then you'll see a number of resources. One of those is this recurring giving plan. So if you have not formed a recurring giving plan, then what I would encourage you to do is to send everybody some self-addressed stamped envelopes today that is so that they can be in social distancing, not having to go to the store or to the post office to get stamps to send you funds. So there's that prompt to the recurring giving program. First thing I do is promote, get a promotional team set up. Pastor, don't try to do this by yourself. Invite others in. The more voices that the church sees you lifting up, the better this is going to be accepted. You're going to need to create an FAQ giving fact sheet that you can post online. You can deliver it electronically. You can keep paper copies of it in the pews or in your informational area. When you come back, you can mail it to people. We have examples in the guide, but it essentially tells what recurring giving is, why it's important to the donor to consider, why it's important to the church, and specifically what your preferred method of giving is. It costs you substantially less to do ACH in almost every case than it does to do credit card. And then there's a page in there that talks, actually several pages, that talk about optimizing your church's website. It is critical that you have the things that we've talked about in place on your website, the landing page that persons go to when they start automatic giving. An example would be a big block that invites people to make this gift recurring. If you have the opportunity to double opt-in, go ahead and check that box. And then if they try to process it, we'll ask them, are you sure you want to make a recurring gift? If you can't do that, leave the block open, but very prominent where it's clear you are suggesting that people sign up for recurring giving. The same is true for credit card fees. Most churches that I see are not charging, are not even giving the donor the opportunity to contribute and cover the cost of the credit card fee. So I would encourage you to set those up, check that box, and when you do, about 40 to 50% of people will actually cover that 2.75% or whatever your fee is. The other ones will look at that and they will be aware that there's an expense for the benefit that they're getting for credit card miles or cash back or whatever they're choosing to use their credit card for. Want to get your leaders to sign up first. That's critical. One of the things we do is announce this is how many leaders we had signed up beforehand. And each week in worship, we not only say how many new folks have signed up, but how many leaders have signed up. Use video as an example. You want to send that FAQ, the ACH out. You want to do a video touch that says that it's coming, short video. We've got links in there to tell you how to shoot a good video on your phone or on Zoom or some other feature. Be sure and create that seat back card so you can start training people, and that can be what the pastor puts in every week. And this process is about a 5-week process to run this through to get you to above 50%. So now we're going to pivot to staying connected to your financial and ministry leaders. Joel, why don't you take this part?
You bet, Joe. Thanks so much for that great content around recurring giving, and appreciate all the leadership that you're giving there as well. And I do want to say that, and I failed to mention this earlier, that in Giving 365, there are resources for offering talks. And I know I covered a lot of information, moved quickly, but there are, I think, 4 or 5 really strong resources that can help you with the offering talk. So now let's talk about staying engaged with your ministry leaders and your financial leaders, because at the end of the day, moving and navigating through this season will be about leadership. The leadership of the church, the leadership of the staff, but also the leadership within the church. Beginning first with your ministry leaders, Who are your ministry leaders? That's anyone that currently provides leadership to any team or ministry in your church. It may be a leader of a small group, a leader of a Sunday school class. If you have ministry teams, so the leaders of those teams, it's committee chairs, it's deacons, elders, anyone that is in a role of giving leadership. But in every church, there are those that I call untitled. They may not be serving actively as a deacon or an elder or on the vestry, but they are proven, respected voice that have an influence within the church. It's important for us to remember that this group typically is going to account for between 35 and 40% of your total giving. They are impact givers, but they're ministry leaders. Let's go to the next slide real quick. Let's talk about who the financial leaders. So typically a financial leader is identified as a family or an individual that typically would give $10,000 or more annually. Now this is about 10% of your families, and this group, different from your ministry leaders, they're going to give somewhere between 35 and 50% of the total annual giving. And these are the folk that often, not always, but often, they're in a better position to weather difficult times. And you can see the asterisk around the 10,000 for some churches, smaller churches. This might need to be adjusted down. But again, remembering that your financial leaders are going to give about 25 to 50% of your total giving. So let's go to the next slide.
So Joel, are you saying that if I'm in a small church, that if I were just to take all of my donors, line them top to bottom, when I run down and we've got about 40% of giving, those are my financial leaders, regardless of the amount they give?
That's
to
correct.
the church?
So in a smaller church, it might be, the threshold might be 7,000. It could even be 5,000 or 6,000. So that's correct, Joe. So here's why it's important to be intentionally, strategically engaged with your financial and ministry leaders. Combine these two folk, and there is always some overlap. Some of your financial leaders are ministry leaders, and vice versa, but these two groups represent the 20% of your church that typically give and do 80%. It's the Pareto principle. This is a group that will often step up to help when others can't or they're just not able to. They will have the most influence in the church. And if they're invited and they're connected and they're engaged, they will use their influence to support the leadership of the church. They are full of wisdom and creative ideas. And this crisis, this season that we're in, is just a tremendous opportunity to get them even more deeply engaged with you and with the ministries of the church. This is the group that want to feel in the know. They need to hear information first, and they want to be connected. So here are a couple of strategies. First of all, consider this coming week making a direct contact with these individuals, these families in your church. It could be a video, it could be an email, it could be a letter. If it is a letter, please hand sign that. And we've included a sample of what that letter could be in Giving 365. And then in addition to that letter, and in addition to other touches that the church might be doing, consider a separate segmented communication to this group each week, that within that communication would be any new information that might be helpful for them to know, or developments. Always include something inspirational, that in addition to data and specific and logistics, something that continues to communicate that the church is being the church, even when the church can't gather at the building. Here's how our church is rising to the occasion. Include something inspirational. And then some kind of a call to action, whether it's to pray, to serve, to give, always include some kind of a call to action. Lean into those with known, proven leadership skill sets. This is too big and too important for us to feel like as staff, we have to figure this thing out alone. God has given to every church folk with unique skill sets that can come alongside and help make decisions and process things that need to happen. Lean into those folk that God has entrusted to you. There is wisdom in a multitude of counselors. Who are the business leaders in your church that need to hear from their pastor, their minister? Who are the community leaders that are making decisions that may not be popular, and they just need to hear from their pastor, their staff? We're praying for you. We care for you. Who are the medical leaders that are risking their lives every day? What a great opportunity for you as staff to reach out to them and say, thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate you and we're praying for you. One other strategy related to this to consider, and again, there's a resource, some talking points in Giving 365, but consider reaching out to your top 20 givers with a phone call. This is not asking them to give. It's not even talking about giving unless they bring it up, but it's just simply, how are you doing? How is your family? How are things with your work business? There may be some of your top 20 givers that are wrestling with having to make difficult financial decisions. And again, to hear from their pastor that we are praying for you. We know this is a difficult time. What is God showing you in your prayer life? How can I, as your pastor, as your minister, how can I pray for you? How can the church be there for you? And I just want to, again, underscore the importance to always include a thank you. But it's very significant what it might do in the life of your top 20, 30 donors to get a phone call that just says, I care for you, I'm praying for you, when you're not making a financial ask. And so the last slide kind of summarizes what we've been trying to talk about, and that is this. This is a season that is about leadership, bold, courageous, compassionate leadership. It is important for the leaders in your church, financial and ministry leaders, to see you proactively giving compassionate and strong leadership in this season, and to see you working together with other leaders for the good of the families in your church, the good of the church, the good of the community, and ultimately to flatten the curve and the good of the cause that we're trying to combat at this point. So Joe, I'm going to turn it back over to you at this and let you.
Well, Norma, we've run right at an hour. Looks like most of the folks are staying with us. If there are questions, Joel and I could take a couple of them.
Yes, and we've had questions throughout the webinar, and so I hope that you're getting the information that you need. But we do have time for a quick question or two if something is burning and you want to have it responded to. We're open.
Joe, one of the, while questions are coming in, one of the things that I'm experiencing from pastors I'm coaching to make those just reach out calls to their donors. It could apply to their high capacity ministry leaders as well, asking how they are doing. These financial leaders in particular tend to be pretty lonely people. They may be stressed about their business. They may be, and they don't have somebody they can talk to about their fears, because they're putting on that brave face to their employees and maybe even their families. So I'm seeing some of these business leaders opening up to their pastors in profound ways, and I've coached the pastors to stay away from asking for money on these conversations. But the reverse is happening, that many times these financial leaders and ministry leaders are saying, hey, what can I do? How can I help? Can I give more? Can I serve more? What can I do? Is that what you're finding also?
Absolutely, Joe. And to kind of underscore something you said earlier in this piece, many of our financial leaders, they do lead businesses, and they're struggling, they're hurting, they're worried about the people that they're responsible for keeping employed, or keeping, the paychecks that their businesses are trying to give to their folk. And so getting some kind of a compassionate pastoral touch is just important. That's the first piece. But the second piece is, you're exactly right. If they bring up, how is the church doing financially? How is our offering this past Sunday? How are we tracking? What are our trend lines? by all means, follow that conversation, but let them take you there. There may come a time in the coming weeks, maybe the coming month, that there would be a more direct conversation. But I think initially 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks or so in, contact with your financial leaders is primarily about their heart and about your ministry to them and to their family.
All right, we have a question that has just come in. How can I best give comfort about e-giving to my older members who are fearful of giving out their personal information? Joe, do you want to speak to that?
I do. To set up e-giving, they're not giving out any more personal information than is on their check, which they're sending to all kinds of people around the community. Once the information off that check is verified, is put into the church's system, and the bank says that information is in fact correct and good, then the church should be destroying those. There wouldn't be a reason to need to keep that. So they're not giving any information out to the church that they're not given to the water company, that they're not given to the clerk at Walmart. So I would say sit with them and help explain that using the description that using bank draft is essentially the same thing that you're doing with a water company, that you're doing with other kinds of utilities, and being compassionate to their fears, and let them know it's the same risk as writing a check at Walmart. Only at the church, we're double verifying this. We've got people who are auditing the books, and Norma's written a great piece on internal controls in the church in this season, that you can go over the steps that you take that don't exist in those places that I just described, to ensure that their personal information, to ensure that their funds are in fact safe.
Joe, I think too, added to that would be having someone in that age group that is doing the recurring giving to be able to say, how they cross that threshold, for someone to say, I was fearful of this as well, and I was concerned about giving up information, and here's how I process that, and here's why I feel safe in doing it. Sometimes it's easier for someone in that cohort or in that age group to talk about how they made that, how they went down that path.
And that really speaks to the use of testimonies, which are called out in that resource.
Yes.
It's fine to hear it from the church, but it's much more effective if users who are just members of the church actually share their experiences.
Thank you. And I want to bring in one of our colleagues. Craig Miller has been working with the Q&A during the webinar, and Craig wanted to share a response that he gave to a very timely question. Craig, can you share with us?
I am here and glad to be. Two things very quickly. A lot of you have asked, will this be recorded and will I receive it? We have recorded it. We'll send out a link to everyone who registered. But a question that came in earlier for Joe and for Joel, and maybe this is kind of taking us back to a more basic part of the recurring giving. What are dip jars and what is ACH, the automated clearinghouse? Can you say a word or two about just exactly what those are?
I can. The ACH means automated clearinghouse, and it is the term used in banking circles for what we call bank draft or bill pay or automatic bill pay. So it is a means by which banks transfer money, and the title is ACH, which is why you see me describe it in the document as ACH/bank draft, because people tend to know what bank draft is. Dip jars are literally these handheld, look like they can be fixed. The ones I found most fun are actually in like big 44-ounce drink cups with coffee cups with a handle and a top on them and a little sign on the back of it that explains how to use. And it just has a slot like you would see in an ATM machine or another card reader. You dip your card in and it reads it. That's not going to help you. I can't think of a way that would help you in this time of social distancing. But when you return, could be a way that, for instance, your youth in a youth group could take an offering. I see it used in Christian coffee shops that hold church. They just pass the cube. That's another, basically it's a device that fits on an iPhone or an Android phone that allows you to swipe. Those things are pretty common, but you just Google it. Google dip jar and giving kiosk, and you're going to see all kinds of advertisements for those.
One last question that I picked up. Can you guys give some examples of some text to give platforms?
So virtually every company that's doing online giving also has text to give. So the three companies that we showed you, PushPay, Banco, Totally, do that. But there are dozens and dozens of third-party providers out there that do text to give. I would recommend you try to at least consider the advantages of using the same company that does your online giving. So you've got a single platform, single interface, you know it works, you know the process by which those contributions get recorded in the books or the church management software of the church. We don't endorse any particular vendor. I think we'd tell you if we ran across one that was doing a poor job with it, but your major companies are. And I would just ask around to churches in your neighborhood, or ask your church CHMS provider like ACS, Shelby. They have their own products. They can certainly show you what they have to offer.
Okay, well, we have gone about 10 minutes over. Thank you so much for participating in this today. I want to remind you that if you have not yet registered for Giving 365, please take an opportunity to do that, and you will be able to receive all of the slide deck that has been shared in this webinar, along with an amazing amount of resources that are available there. And I do want to finally just say that we're with you in this time of crisis. We are walking through this with each of the churches and with anyone that would seek us out. If you would like to have a 30-minute consultation with someone from Horizons, please take advantage of that, and you can find that information also in Giving 365. So with that, Joe or Joel, is there anything else you would like to share?
Thank you for your time today. We appreciate you giving us this moment.
Okay.